It sounds like a legend, a tale passed down in hushed tones among veterans. But on the bitterly cold morning of January 14th, 1945, in the shattered outskirts of the Belgian village of Rochelinville, this story became reality. The 517th Parachute Regimental Combat Team, battered and exhausted, was holding a thin line against a desperate German counterattack. Among them was Private First Class Harold "Red" Atkins of Company F, armed not with a standard-issue M1 Garand, but with a Winchester Model 1897 trench shotgun, an unlikely weapon for the open fields of the Ardennes. As the fog lifted and the distant rumble of artillery grew closer, Atkins found himself alone, cut off, and facing an entire platoon of German Fallschirmjäger. What happened next would become one of the most extraordinary moments of individual heroism in the closing months of World War II. To understand how a single paratrooper came to stand against overwhelming odds, we must first step back to the winter of 1944-45. The Battle of the Bulge was raging. Hitler's last great gamble in the West had thrown the Allied lines into chaos. The 517th Parachute Regimental Combat Team, attached to the 18 Airborne Corps, had been rushed to the front to plug gaps and hold key positions along the Somme River. Rochelinville, a small village perched on a ridge overlooking the river, was a vital crossroads. If the Germans broke through here, they could threaten the entire southern flank of the Allied advance. Company F, under the command of Captain John T. Jack McKnight, was tasked with holding the eastern approach. Among his men was PFC Harold Atkins, a 22-year-old farm boy from Iowa, known for his quiet determination and uncanny skill with a shotgun, a skill honed hunting pheasants in the cornfields of his youth. The men of Company F were exhausted. They had been fighting almost continuously since Christmas, enduring freezing temperatures, dwindling supplies, and relentless enemy pressure. Morale was low, and casualties were mounting. Yet, as dawn broke on January 14th, they prepared to face another day of battle. Atkins, like many paratroopers, had a deep respect for his issued weapons. But he also carried a Winchester Model 1897 trench shotgun, a weapon more commonly associated with the muddy trenches of World War I than the forests of the Ardennes. Its 6-round magazine and rapid pump action made it devastating at close range, but many scoffed at its utility in open combat. Still, Atkins insisted on carrying it, believing that in the chaos of close-quarters fighting, it might just save his life. By 0700 hours, the temperature hovered just below freezing. A thick mist clung to the ground, muffling the sounds of distant gunfire. Company F's positions were strung out along a shallow trench line, reinforced with sandbags and the wreckage of previous battles. The men shivered in their foxholes, clutching their weapons, eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. Atkins was assigned to the far right flank, near a small copse of trees that offered little cover but a commanding view of the approach road. With him were 3 other paratroopers, Privates Miller, Sanchez, and O'Reilly. Their orders were simple: hold the line at all costs. At 0730 hours, the first signs of trouble appeared. A German reconnaissance patrol, 10 men strong, probed the American positions. Atkins watched as they moved cautiously through the trees, their camouflage smocks blending with the winter landscape. He waited until they were within 30 yards, then opened fire with a shotgun. The roar of the Model 1897 shattered the morning stillness, and 2 Germans fell instantly. The rest scattered, returning fire with MP-40 submachine guns and Kar 98K rifles. The firefight was brief but intense. Miller was hit in the shoulder. Sanchez took a grazing wound to the leg, but the Americans held. The Germans withdrew, leaving 2 dead and a trail of blood in the snow. By 0800 hours, the situation had grown more ominous. Radio intercepts indicated that elements of the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, elite German paratroopers, were massing for a coordinated assault. Intelligence estimated their strength at over 120 men, supported by 2 MG-42 machine guns and a pair of light mortars. Company F, reduced to just 38 effective men, faced odds of more than 3 to 1. Captain McKnight moved along the line, offering words of encouragement. "Hold fast, boys. Reinforcements are on the way. We just have to buy them time." But everyone knew the truth. If the Germans broke through here, there would be no second chance. At 0830 hours, the first mortar shells began to fall. The ground shook as explosions ripped through the trenches, sending showers of earth and snow into the air. The men hunkered down, praying the barrage would end quickly. Atkins clutched his shotgun, feeling the familiar weight in his hands. He checked his ammunition, 24 shells left, all 00 buckshot. By 0900 hours, the German assault began in earnest. Waves of Fallschirmjäger advanced through the trees, their distinctive helmets and camouflage smocks visible through the thinning mist. The crack of rifle fire and the staccato bursts of machine guns filled the air. Company F fought back with everything they had: M1 Garens, bars, and the occasional burst from a captured MG-42. Atkins and his small team held their sector, firing steadily as the enemy closed in. The shotgun roared again and again, each blast sending a cone of lead into the advancing Germans. At close range, the effect was devastating. Atkins moved with practiced efficiency, pumping the action, firing, reloading, never wasting shot. By 1000 hours, the situation was desperate. Miller and Sanchez were both wounded and had to be evacuated. O'Reilly was killed by a sniper's bullet. Atkins was alone, his trench littered with spent shells and the bodies of fallen enemies. The Germans, sensing weakness, began to concentrate their attack on his position. By 1015 hours, Atkins faced the unthinkable. He was the last man holding the right flank. 40 German paratroopers, supported by an MG-42 team, were advancing directly toward his trench. The rest of Company F was too heavily engaged to send help. The radio crackled with desperate calls for artillery support, but the guns were silent. Ammunition was running low across the entire sector. Atkins could hear the enemy shouting orders in guttural German, their boots crunching in the snow. He could see the glint of steel as bayonets were fixed. Fear gripped him, but he forced himself to focus. He checked his shotgun, 6 shells in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. He had 13 shells left in his pouch. The first wave of Germans came at a run, firing from the hip. Atkins waited until they were within 20 yards, then unleashed a blast of buckshot. 3 men fell, their bodies tumbling into the snow. He pumped the action, fired again, another 2 dropped. The rest dove for cover, returning fire with a hail of bullets that tore into the sandbags above his head. Atkins reloaded, his hands moving with the speed of desperation. The Germans regrouped, flanking his position. A grenade landed in the trench, but Atkins kicked it away just in time. The explosion showered him with dirt, but he was unharmed. The second wave came, this time from 2 directions. Atkins fired left, then right, the shotgun booming in the confined space. He felt a burning pain in his left arm. A bullet had grazed him, but he ignored it, focusing on the enemy. Another German fell, then another. The survivors hesitated, unsure how many Americans they faced. For 3 brutal hours, Atkins held the line alone. The ground around his trench was churned to mud and blood. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with sweat and grime. Yet he refused to yield. By 1300 hours, the Germans had lost over a dozen men trying to take his position. Their officers, frustrated and enraged, ordered a final assault. All 40 remaining paratroopers surged forward, determined to overwhelm the lone defender. Atkins fired until his shotgun was empty, then drew his Colt M1911 pistol, firing point-blank at the nearest attackers. He was hit again, this time in the leg, but he kept fighting. The Germans closed in, some leaping into the trench, only to be met by the butt of Atkins' shotgun. Pause. 22:0-27:00, the turning point. Little did the Germans know, help was finally on the way. At 1315 hours, the distant rumble of engines signaled the arrival of a platoon from the 596th Parachute Engineer Company, supported by a Sherman tank from the 14th Armored Division. The tank's 75mm gun roared, sending high explosive shells into the German ranks. The engineers, armed with Thompson submachine guns and grenades, swept through the trees, catching the enemy in a deadly crossfire. The Germans, caught between Atkins' stubborn defense and the sudden arrival of reinforcements, broke and ran. Some surrendered, others fled into the woods, leaving their dead and wounded behind. When the smoke cleared, Atkins was found slumped in his trench, his uniform soaked with blood, his shotgun empty. Around him lay the bodies of 18 German paratroopers, with another 12 wounded and captured nearby. The rest had vanished into the forest. Medics rushed to his side, amazed that he was still alive. Despite his wounds, Atkins insisted on walking back to the aid station under his own power. His first words to Captain McKnight were simple: "I held the line, sir." What happened next would become legendary. Word of Atkins' stand spread quickly through the regiment. Men who had doubted the value of the shotgun now spoke of it with awe. The Winchester Model 1897, once mocked as a bird gun, was now seen as a weapon of last resort and of incredible heroism. In the aftermath of the battle, the 517th Parachute Regimental Combat Team held Rocha-Linville. The German counterattack had been blunted, and the southern flank of the Allied advance was secure. For his actions, PFC Harold Atkins was recommended for the Distinguished Service Cross, the Army's second-highest award for valor. The citation read, in part, "For extraordinary heroism and selfless devotion to duty, Private First Class Atkins single-handedly repelled repeated enemy assaults, inflicting heavy casualties and preventing a breakthrough that would have endangered the entire regiment." Atkins spent several weeks recovering from his wounds. He never considered himself a hero. "I just did what I had to do," he told an Army reporter. Any one of the boys would have done the same. But his actions had a lasting impact. The story of this shotgun stand at Rocha-Linville became a symbol of the paratroopers' determination and fighting spirit. The Winchester Model 1897, once dismissed as obsolete, was now respected as a tool of survival in the most desperate circumstances. The cost was high. Company F suffered 19 killed and 27 wounded in the defense of Rocha-Linville. German casualties were estimated at over 60 killed, wounded, or captured. The village itself was reduced to rubble, a stark reminder of the price of war. Yet, amid the destruction, the courage of one man stood out, a testament to the power of individual resolve in the face of overwhelming odds. 32.00, 31.00 outro. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to World War II Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.